Hello and welcome to another episode of Reason at Large. I'm Craig Biddle. Today I want to answer a question that was sent to me anonymously, and not surprisingly it's a bit of an unfriendly question, but I want to answer it because it'll give me an opportunity to clarify a few things that I think will be of value to my viewers. The question is this: if an objectivist is someone who accepts Ayn Rand's entire philosophy as true, how is objectivism different from a cult? Well, to begin with, an objectivist is not merely someone who accepts Ayn Rand's entire philosophy as true. That is not the definition of an objectivist. An objectivist is someone who, by means of his own observations and logic, by his own thinking and his own integrations, sees that the principles of Ayn Rand's philosophy correspond to reality, that they are true. And this does not mean that he agrees with every word that Ayn Rand ever said. It means that he agrees with the fundamental principles of her philosophy. So the question is, what are those principles? And not only does the person agree with those principles, but he embraces them and lives by them, upholds them as absolutes. So it's not just agreement. It's not just, oh yeah, I call myself an objectivist. It's understanding. It's first-handed understanding of the facts of reality that give rise to and support the ideas, and it's embracing the ideas and upholding them in one's life as absolutes. So that's what constitutes an objectivist. Now, the interesting question is, what are the principles of objectivism, and how do those principles relate to the idea that objectivism is a cult, which is what this question implies? Well, one of the central principles of objectivism is the principle of independence. Ayn Rand wrote a whole book with the theme of the independent thinker versus the second-hander. The novel is called The Fountainhead, and to my knowledge, it's the only book in the history of literature that has a theme where the protagonist is an independent thinker who only goes by his own judgment and only chooses his own values and is unflinching in that regard. And the antagonists are people who are second-handed in some way. They don't go by their own judgment. They defer to others. They defer to authority, or their power lusters, or the like. So right from the beginning, and this is while Ayn Rand was still forming her philosophy, while she was writing the Fountainhead. Right from the beginning, Ayn Rand's whole idea is that the man to be venerated, the essence of a good man is his independence, and the principle of independence is simply the truth that because your mind, because your ability to look at reality and think and integrate and use logic is your only means of knowledge, you must never, ever, give that up in any way, not to an authority, not to a god, not to a group, not to a leader, not to anyone. So the essence of being an objectivist, at least when you're in a social setting, is the virtue of independence. The steadfast position that I'm only going to accept the things that make sense to me, the things that I can see or derive from perceptual evidence as true, and I'm only going to uphold the values that matter to me. I don't defer to others. And this is the difference between a first-hander and a second-hander. A first-hander has a primary orientation toward reality. He doesn't turn to others to see what's true or what he should value. He just turns to reality and says, what do I think is true? And a second-hander has the alternate mentality, and he turns to others to find out, what should I think? What's the right thing to believe? And that is, of course, the cult-like mentality. So right there, just focusing on one aspect of objectivism, the virtue of independence, we can see that there's something very, very much at odds with the whole cult mentality. But let's think for a minute about what a cult is, because that will help to further clarify this. A cult is precisely a group or an organization with a leader who demands unquestioning agreement or obedience. That's what a cult is. That's why we need the concept cult, because it identifies those kinds of groups and institutions. You wouldn't say, the cult of Montessori, meaning that anyone who sees that Maria Montessori's educational principles are true, or for the most part true. Anybody who embraces those ideas is a cultist, or anybody who embraces Jeffersonian principles of government and liberty is a cultist because he accepts these ideas. No, we don't even use the concept there, because we know that the whole idea in these areas is that, well, sure, these people may have come up with these ideas first, or may have popularized them first, but the ideas themselves are supported by facts of reality, and if somebody can see the facts that support them and embraces those ideas, then those ideas are his, in effect. And so, and this is why we need the concept cult, because there's a whole nother mentality, there's a different mentality that doesn't do that. And this is why, Heaven's Gate, Jim Jones, and the various cults throughout history, the Manson family, arguably, Christianity and the other religions. I mean, some Christians eat the blood, or eat the bread, the body, and drink the blood of their prophet, and almost every religion calls for the acceptance of ideas from authority, ideas that you don't agree with. So I mean, religions can arguably be placed in the context of a cult, but you can't say that it's not proper to say, doesn't make any sense to say that a philosophy that calls for independent thinking is in any way cult-like, because it doesn't involve a leader that's supposed to be agreed with and followed regardless of one's own independent judgment. So just the very definition of a cult and the definition of independent thinking is enough, if you actually understand those definitions, to see a huge difference here. Objectivism is the furthest thing from a cult. If anything, it's the anti-cult. Now, of course, independent thinking is not the only aspect of objectivism. It's a full philosophy. It's got a metaphysics, epistemology, ethics, politics, and aesthetics. So let's take a quick peek at some of the principles of objectivism and see how they stand up to the idea of the philosophy being cult-like, or followers of the philosophy, those who embrace it and try to live by it, being at all cult-like. So objectivism at the level of metaphysics holds that there's this one world that we live in that we can see, and that's it. That there's one reality, and we need to understand it and figure out what our needs are in that reality and pursue those needs in order to live. So there's just this one place. We do not posit that there's a second reality, a heaven or another dimension, because we can't see it and because there's no evidence for it. So we don't accept that. If an authority tells us that there is another dimension, we say, well, we don't go by authority. So you'll have to come up either with a proof or some evidence or something, but we just don't accept that idea if you just posit it. So you can see right there, our metaphysics is anti-cult. We're not going to take some authority's word for there being another dimension, nor do we take the word of the other side, the subjectivist side, saying, well, there is no reality. Well, that's ridiculous. We say, look, it's right here. You can knock on my desk. We can see the lights. We can have conversations with people. We exist. Et cetera, et cetera. So we don't take their authority either. We say, well, we go by what we can see and what we can prove. And this brings us to the epistemology, which I've touched on a little bit in talking about the metaphysics, but we go by observation and logic. That's what objectivism calls for, and that's what a real objectivist does. So if somebody comes along and says, look, there might be a God, you can't prove that there isn't one, we say, well, that doesn't make any sense. You can't just assert something arbitrarily and say that there might be. Might means that there's got to be some evidence for it. Something is possible when there's some evidence for it. If it's just arbitrarily asserted, then it's not possible. It's just noise. So at the epistemological level, we don't take people's word for the existence of God or the need of sacrifice or anything. We say we want evidence. You have some evidence to support your ideas. Let's see it. You have good logical arguments based on evidence to support your ideas. Let's hear them. So at the epistemological level, objectivists are demanding evidence. And Ayn Rand was adamant about this herself, about her philosophy. She says in several places, you know, I am not looking for blind followers. I am not looking for people to just accept my ideas. You should not accept any ideas unless you can see that they're true, unless you can see the evidence and the logical arguments in support of them. So the epistemology is completely antithetical to what a cult is. The ethics. The ethics is all about self-interest and pursuing the values that will make your life great. How do you do that? By using your own mind, your own observations and logic, by choosing your own goals and not, you know, not deferring to others on what you should do or what you should believe or what you should pursue. So it's completely independent. We don't turn to the group or to some leader to tell us what to do. That's ridiculous. That would be cult-like. Real objectivists don't do that. So at the ethics level, objectivism is completely anti-cult. You know, as I mentioned earlier, one of the central virtues of objectivism is the virtue of independence, which is contrasted with the vice of second-handedness. And of course, at the political level, we call for a society that respects and protects individual rights, so people can act on their judgment and not be bossed around by some leader whose ideas we have to accept. So at every level, you can see that there's no relationship whatsoever between objectivism or an objectivist and cult-like behavior. It's just ridiculous to posit other. I mean, it would be to say objectivism is cult-like is to say, the one philosophy that adamantly says that no one should accept anything except that which makes perfect sense to him based on his own observations and logic is really a cult-like, you know, philosophy, and it's got real, you know, and the people who embrace this idea are cultists. That's just silly. Now, I do want to say, unfortunately, it's true that there are a number of people who, and unfortunately, quite a few people, who claim to be objectivists and then act like cultists. You know, there are people who, in effect, treat Ayn Rand's words as dogma to be, you know, accepted and agreed with, you know, regardless of understanding, and that's wrong. But you know, you don't judge objectivism or objectivists in general based on what somebody who claims to be an objectivist does. I mean, we wouldn't do that to Christianity or to Marxism, right? We wouldn't say if some Christian, somebody says, I'm a Christian, but what he does in reality is makes a lot of money and lives his life beautifully and never gives charity to anything other than the things that he thinks are really in his best interest. And he lives fully selfishly and never accepts ideas that you know, on faith. He only accepts ideas based on his own observations and logic. We would not say, well, look, this is what, here's this guy, he claims to be a Christian and he's living this way, so that must be what Christianity is, right? That would be unfair to Christianity. So we would never do that, and it wouldn't be correct even to call that guy a Christian. He's not really a Christian. He would be an egoist, a rational egoist, if that's the way he lived. And we wouldn't do it to Marxists either. We wouldn't say, or to communists. We wouldn't say, here's this guy who claims that, you know, property rights are absolutes and that individuals are the supreme value in any political or social context, and that there's no such thing as group rights, and you know, society is just a group of individuals. I mean, if the guy actually professed these ideas but said, yeah, I'm a Marxist, we would not then say, well, this must be what Marxism is all about, and we wouldn't say, oh, all Marxists are actually advocates of property rights and the like. So the same is true of objectivism. If somebody acts like a cultist, if somebody is in fact a second-hander or is looking for a leader to follow without, you know, thought, you know, follow and obey unthinkingly, that person is not an objectivist. He's not upholding the principles of objectivism in any way. He doesn't understand the principles of objectivism, or if he does understand them, he's just evading his understanding, which is even worse on a moral level. So it's just unfair to objectivism and objectivists to pretend that somebody who acts that way has anything to do with the philosophy. So I hope that helps to clarify the profound difference, the categorically opposing nature of objectivism and any kind of a cult. That's it for today's episode of Reason at Large. If you have a question you'd like me to address in a future video, please email it to me at cbiddle@theobjectivestandard.com. Thanks for tuning in. Enjoy your day.